Hello, my name is Amy Zoglauer, and I will be presenting on Orthorexia nervosa, when healthy becomes unhealthy. Orthorexia nervosa, or ON for short, is an up-and-coming topic in dietetics as well as sports nutrition, so I hope to teach you all a little bit more about what that means. So what is orthorexia nervosa? It is defined as a condition characterized by disordered eating behavior generated by a pathologic obsession for biologically pure and healthy nutrition. So orthorexia may start out as an innocent attempt to eat more healthfully, but they become fixated on food quality and purity, and they become consumed with what and how much to eat and how to deal with any slip-ups from this ideology that they might have. The term was initially used to describe an unhealthy fixation with healthy eating, but with orthorexia, their self-esteem can become wrapped up in the purity of their diet, and this causes them to sometimes feel superior to others, especially in regard to their food intake. Eventually, their food choices can become so restrictive in both variety and calories that their health can start to suffer, which is an ironic twist for a person so completely dedicated to healthy eating. Eventually, the obsession with healthy eating can crowd out other activities and interests in their lives, impair relationships, and become physically dangerous. It can also cause them to socially isolate themselves because they are unable to follow the pure diet pattern when they go out to eat with friends or when they eat at somebody else's house, so it can definitely start to affect many aspects of their lives. Orthorexia is still a controversial topic because it's not clear whether it's a new eating disorder, a different psychiatric disorder, a disorder at all, or a variant of an existing eating disorder. It also has not been defined as a distinct order in any edition of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, or the DSM. So you may be wondering what the differences are between orthorexia nervosa and anorexia nervosa. Well, unlike most patients with anorexia or bulimia who primarily obsess about the quantity of their food intake as well as their physical appearance, patients with orthorexia are more preoccupied with the quality of their food intake. A study conducted in 2015 found that key differences between orthorexia nervosa and other eating disorders included concerns about their weight, the eating disorder pathology, and specific orthorexic behaviors. And these distinctions are important because traditional treatment for anorexia nervosa might not be appropriate for someone with ON. So just to point out some important parts of this table, the goal for orthorexia nervosa is a pathological drive to be as healthy as possible. They have an obsession with the quality of their food, a lack of obsession with their body image, no fear of becoming fat, and it's more prevalent in males, or there's not really a difference seen in genders. And the goals of anorexia nervosa are weight loss, obsession with quantity of their food, obsession with their body image, and fear of becoming fat, and it's more prevalently seen in females. On the topic of gender, one recent study completed in 2015 found that there were no statistically significant differences in orthorexia prevalence between the two genders, as this chart shows us, and aspects of body image were not associated with fixation on healthy eating in male students. So how is orthorexia nervosa currently being diagnosed? Well, these are some proposed diagnostic criteria that have been developed in a few studies, and there are a lot of them, so I'm just going to point out a few that are pertinent. And in order to be diagnosed with this, typically they say the person would have to have two or more of the following. So an important one is the rigid avoidance of foods believed by the patient to be unhealthy, which may include foods containing any fat, preservatives, food additives, animal products, or other ingredients considered by the subject to be unhealthy. Now, it might be hard as a registered dietitian to detect if your client has this as a symptom of orthorexia nervosa, because usually when people are coming to you, they want to follow your recommendations to avoid potentially unhealthy foods. So they might be hiding some other symptoms behind this seemingly innocent symptom, such as guilty feelings and worries after transgressions when unhealthy or impure foods are consumed, to the point where they're socially isolating themselves or feeling seriously depressed about this. Some other proposed diagnostic criteria is the impairment of physical health due to nutritional imbalances, such as developing malnutrition due to an unbalanced diet, and severe distress or impairment of social, academic, or vocational functioning due to obsessional thoughts and behaviors, focusing on patients' beliefs about healthy eating. And lastly, there are two other criterion. The first is that this disturbance is not merely an exacerbation of the symptoms of another disorder, such as OCD, and this behavior is not associated to religious observances, food allergies, or medical conditions that could be requiring these restrictions. In this class, we reviewed a few different types of questionnaires that are used to diagnose or detect the risk of eating disorders. And one that has been developed for orthorexia is called the ORTO-15, O-R-T-O-15. And it is an assessment tool that uses 15 items to detect risk for orthorexia nervosa. Yet this has not been fully validated, and there are many versions that exist. The way that it can sometimes work, depending on the version, is that the higher the test result, the closer one's behaviors are to normal eating behaviors. According to a 2015 study, the Ortho-15 has been validated in Italy, Turkey, Brazil, and the USA, and it's the most commonly used tool to conduct a population diagnosis of this condition, yet it still has yet to be validated in many other countries. Although it has been validated in the USA, surprisingly little research has been done on Americans, and it also must still be validated for a wider variety of age groups. This same study administered the Ortho-15 to 399 Polish students, ages 15 to 21, and they determined that it had a good to very good repeatability, so they deemed it reliable for this population. What populations have we seen the prevalence of orthorexia in? Well, the prevalence of this condition varies widely, from 6% in an Italian sample to 88.7% in a sample comprised entirely of female nutritionists in Brazil. Most prevalence for orthorexia nervosa studies regularly report rates from 30% to 70%, while anorexia nervosa and bulimia are estimated to be no higher than about 2%. So on the surface, these numbers look completely alarming, yet they are done in specific populations only, and they're using non-validated methods of diagnosis. So there's still a lot of work to be done on these percentages. Many of the studies have been completed in other countries like Italy, Turkey, Brazil, and Poland, but there's not a lot in North America, as we said previously, and most of them are using the Ortho-15, which hasn't been validated everywhere. A 2016 study was conducted on 448 college students and found that Hispanic, Latino, and overweight obese subjects demonstrated scores in the health fanatic range, while college major, gender, and age were not significantly associated with this score. So they were stating that this type of population, Hispanic, Latino, and overweight obese college students, might be at a greater risk. That type of population might be at a greater risk for ON. And another 2015 study examined 31 female graduate dietetics students and found a link between increased nutrition knowledge or a higher level of education. They compared new students to long-term students, and they found that improvements in intuitive eating, unconditional permission to eat, and orthorexia scores showed up with the greater amount of education that they had. So the longer they had been receiving nutrition education, the less risk they were at for developing ON. And this emphasizes the need for more nutrition education in at-risk populations for any form of disordered eating. So why is orthorexia nervosa a problem? What are some potential contributing factors for this? Eating disorders in general are being seen more and more in men recently because of the increasing importance society is placing on healthfulness and body image. Adolescent and males and adult males are buying into the fitness and health message, and we're seeing boys as young as 8 or 9 talking about protein powders, and men are now joining the circuit women have been taking on forever. The whole flux of health food stores such as Mariano's, Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, Standard Market, the pressure to make healthy choices for yourself, trends and fads such as certain diet fads, trends such as GMO, organic, cage-free, free-range. All of this can just be very overwhelming to the general consumer, and some people who are devoted to healthy eating can just go overboard and develop an eating disorder in relation to that focus, just as some people in their quest to avoid obesity can become anorexic. I think people nowadays are on a constant search for accurate information, and the instability of what people consider expert advice contribute to feelings of anxiety around food choices, and they can kind of sense the futility in their efforts to navigate through the information that's available. A 2012 article asked 8 groups of women ages 15 to 45 about different factors that influence their food choices, and they found that participants had an increased perception of dietary responsibility and decision-making, as well as confusion and anxiety regarding the breadth of complex and dynamic health information in today's society. The authors concluded that many of the discussions were reflective of an orthorexic society. An interesting current study that focused directly on athletes was entitled Orthorexia nervosa, a frequent eating disordered behavior in athletes. And I thought this was important to touch on because the direct topic of this course is eating disorders in athletes of all types. So in this study, 577 athletes completed various questionnaires, including the Ortho 15, and the authors found a high positivity to the Ortho 15, as well as another questionnaire entitled Eat 26 in athletes specifically when compared to a control group. They also concluded that independent predictors of orthorexia nervosa in athletes were the athlete's age, their previous dieting patterns, and then also their competition levels. Further studies may wish to examine sport-specific results in certain sports that may place a higher emphasis on diet patterns, or athletes whose coaches require them to follow a particular dietary pattern. So what would orthorexia nervosa look like in a real athlete? Well, this is just a case study example. This was a real patient. He was a 28-year-old male. He had 3 years of reduced nutritional intake, and he began to limit himself to self-made protein shakes that included only pure amino acid powders because he wanted to avoid the commercial shakes, as he said they had unnecessary fillers. So he presented with severe malnutrition. He started restricting his diet, and the reason why he was making his own shakes is because he viewed his body as a temple, and his diet was designed to give him the pure building blocks that he needed to be healthy. Now, the interesting thing was that he had no body image concerns or issues regarding his weight, and he was diagnosed with an eating disorder not otherwise specified, even though his symptoms sound more so like orthorexia nervosa. So we'll see if this eventually becomes an actual diagnosis option. So what is the role of the registered dietitian nutritionist with an athlete or any patient that is exhibiting signs of orthorexia nervosa? The 2012 article that we discussed earlier that conducted the focus groups on food choices in women emphasized many areas where RDNs are needed to clarify any confusion revolving around food and nutrition messages in the media, and to portray accurate and health-promoting nutrition information to clients. The emphasis on individual responsibility for making healthy food choices can either help or hurt the risk for developing orthorexia. Many of the participants in that study felt mistrust in the food system since it continuously contradicts itself. RDNs must keep up with the latest research in order to properly convey evidence-based information while teaching a balanced method of making food choices. For example, registered dietitians could help patients recognize that everything they eat doesn't need to be organic. If they go out to eat with friends, they can order off the menu even if they don't know about every single ingredient. You can help them recognize their limits. Everyone has some quirks. For example, most dietitians would avoid trans fats at any grocery store. It's okay to have habits, but patients need to be able to recognize when they've crossed the line and it's no longer just a quirk, and that's when they might need help. Patients who are attached to orthorexic behavior might be a bit more responsive to treatment because they're actually concerned about their health. While as with anorexics, there's often so much denial and resistance that anything unhealthy is going on. So dietitians might actually have quite a good opportunity to intervene here. And of course, it's always important to refer to the position of the American Dietetic Association, or now the Journal of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, on the nutrition intervention and the treatment of eating disorders. And they outline a lot of great treatment options for anyone who's displaying these characteristics. Here are my references, and I appreciate all of you listening. Thank you so much.